Chiang Kai-Shek was born on October 31, 1887 and died on April 5, 1975. He was the leader of the Kuomintang Nationalist Party and served as the leader of China between 1928 and 1949. He then moved to Taiwan, also called the Republic of China, in late 1949 after losing the civil war to Mao Zedong, and ruled with absolute power until his death 26 years later. The Constitution of Taiwan allows 2 terms in power, but Chiang Kai-shek held on to power for 26 years, using martial law as his excuse. Some historians think he stayed in power because he thought that US forces would help him retake the mainland one day. Many nationalist supporters respect Chiang Kai-shek as the founding father of Taiwan. But there are people who think his rule was unconstitutional, at best. Some Taiwanese have suggested that Chiang's monuments and statues are removed from places of prominence across the country. In Taiwan, the Kuomintang were responsible for the oppression of local culture, and the imprisonment of over 140,000 Taiwanese people. They were arrested for their perceived opposition to the nationalists. In Chiang's mind, anyone criticizing the party was a communist sympathizer. In late 1949 Chiang left China for Taiwan, where he set up his new government. He held the country under a permanent state of martial law, meaning he had absolute power. His reasoning for this drastic decision was that the Kuomintang was still at war with the communists on the mainland. He served in the Imperial Japanese Army from 1909 to 1911. He had moved to Japan in 1907 to attend a school in Tokyo. It was when he was here that the idea to overthrow the Qing Empire was born, and, when the Wuchang Uprising took place in 1911, he returned home to join the revolutionary forces in China. After Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek expelled communists from the Kuomintang and led a campaign against local warlords, giving him control of the 3 major cities of Canton, Nanjing, and Beijing. The removal of communists from the ranks allowed him free rein to give himself near absolute power over the majority of mainland China. Surprisingly, without the help of the communists, Chiang wouldn't have lasted long. It was actually the communists who convinced the officers to release Chiang and allow him to retake control of the government on the condition he agreed to stop his hate campaign against the communists and join them in the fight against the Japanese invaders. When the Chinese Civil War intensified after World War II, Chiang expected help from the West. But after a war against the Japanese and the Germans, the Allies didn't want to get involved in another war, instead wanting to negotiate a peace between the two, which didn't quite work. Some of Chiang's officers felt that he spent too much time worrying about maintaining his power in the party, when he should have been focusing on fighting the Japanese invasion in Manchuria. He already survived revolts in 1930 and again in 1933. But in 1936 some officers made the decision to take him prisoner with the intention of taking control of the army themselves. Chiang's fight against the Japanese and the communists made him some important friends. But the communist leader Mao Zedong was actually responsible for many of the victories over the Japanese. But Chiang ended up getting the credit from Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt.